Welcome to the Holistic Health Podcast. We are up in London today. How are you, Mr. Shireby?
I'm very well, mate. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. We always enjoy coming up to London to Quaker Street. Do you know what? We haven't actually done that before, which is really silly. We come up to Quaker Street for the podcast up here. We don't actually leverage that and just advertise them because it's a great little studio, isn't it, that we found up here?
It is, yeah. And we made it here in one piece after our surviving the races last weekend, didn't we?
Yeah, we went to Royal Ascot last week, which was really good fun, actually. It's the first time I've ever been to the races up there. And we just did it really to get suited and booted because we don't really get that much opportunity being personal trainers. But it was good fun, wasn't it?
Nice to dress up. I like putting a suit on.
So do
Feeling
I.
good about myself for a day.
And
enjoyable.
it was really good fun. But today we're up here in London because, as always, when we're in London, we have a guest. Welcome, Chloe Thomas.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
So we always start with, obviously, we've just spoken about this off air, so you're going to be prepped. So in terms of introducing yourself to our listeners, who are you? What do you do?
So I'm Chloe and I'm a women's health, nutrition and fitness coach. And I also do mindset coaching as well for women. Yeah.
Awesome. And are you originally from Tunbridge Wells?
Yeah, so I grew up around Ashdown Forest kind of way.
Oh, did you?
And then, then went up to London to go to university to study speech sciences and then got scouted in my second year and became a model and then lived up there for 6-7 years and then moved back to Tunbridge Wells.
Oh, did you? Oh, that's really cool. Do you know what? I really wished at some point in my life I'd lived in London. Yeah. It's cool up here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good thing to do once and then move back.
Move back, get it out of your system and then leave.
Yeah, then leave.
I can see that because it's one of the things I would really love to have done. Because I'm originally from East Grinstead, so I'm actually near Ashdown Forest as well.
Yeah.
And are you all online coaching at the moment, or do you do some in-person stuff as well?
So I do a little bit of in-person,
Right.
Out of 2 Tunbridge Wells gyms, and then but mainly it's online. So worldwide. I do seem to end up with quite a large Tunbridge Wells base of clients, but it's online. Yeah.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the balance between online and in-person, or do you have a preference one over the other now?
Yeah, I mean, I actually prefer online purely because I actually feel like I talk to the client more because I end up talking to them every single day pretty much. But I do hold events in Tunbridge Wells for my clients as well. So we do body confidence events, I do breathwork workshops, things like that. So I do bring them together and I like that. I like the events, the community aspect.
That's really cool, actually, bringing everyone together.
It seems like there's a lot of strings to your bow, Chloe.
Yes, there does.
As I was sort of researching you, we've got personal trainer, we've got nutritional coach, life coach, breath work. There's some CBT involved in there as well.
Yeah.
Like with all that, where did this sort of journey begin for you?
So when I was about 16, I had anorexia. So I was doing my GCSEs, started a diet. And at that age, it was like, what should I do to lose weight? Oh, Weight Watchers, I've just heard that name, I'll just follow that. So just buying basically Weight Watchers products and eating that sort of food. And my food was getting less and less. Obviously, my parents became aware because I was 16. So when you're 16, the adults are allowed to intervene and obviously take you to the doctors because you're still a child. So they did. The doctors sort of let it go, probably because I was lying, on my part, saying, oh yeah, everything's fine. And then it got worse and worse. Went to another school for sixth form. And then luckily my friends went to the teachers and said, there's definitely something wrong. Weighed me and were like, yeah, you've got an eating disorder. So I was pulled out of school. I was going backwards and forwards between hospital appointments and having intense therapy. But the problem with that was I had this thing of if I just eat more, everyone will leave me alone. So I just ate more, gained weight. Everyone did leave me alone because you're then better. And then when I was 19, I relapsed. And it was a lot worse than the first time. Now I'm an adult, parents can't intervene. So they couldn't do anything. Eventually, I was working in Tunbridge Wells M&S on the industrial estate.
Oh, right, yeah.
And my feet swelled up at work, went to the doctors, and they were like, you've got edema, so lack of, obviously, protein. And then at that point, I was like, I just want to get better. Whatever this is that's going on, I need it to go away because I want to be healthy, strong, eat, be normal. And I luckily found the most incredible therapist coach who's still my coach to this day, my life coach, and I've been with her for 14 years. And she said to me, it's not about the food, it's your mind. We need to get to the cause, not the symptom. Every other therapist was like, eat more, exercise less. She was like, forget about the food, forget about the exercise, it's all up here, that needs to be worked on. And that's what led me into that kind of side of things. And then also going to uni than becoming a model. I quit the modelling industry because they basically told me to lose weight when I was already very underweight and had an eating disorder. And then when I quit modelling after 6 years, I was like, what do I do? Like, I've been a model for 6 years. What do I do with my life? Not at uni anymore. And I was like, I'll get a personal trainer because I want to gain weight healthily alongside my therapy. Had an amazing personal trainer, and she helped me with, you know, weightlifting, eating more, understanding nutrition, like how protein is important, fats, carbs, all of that. So I was actually tracking, but in a positive way. I was looking at my calories and macros and like, oh, this is really good. I'm eating more food, slowly gaining more. And then I was like, I want to do this. I want to be a PT. Became a PT, did my nutrition course as well, then moved back to Tunbridge Wells, started in a gym. And that was my face-to-face kind of experience. And then after a couple of years, I just had a weird sort of, I don't know, want to do something else. So I became cabin crew for British Airways for a couple of years.
You've done a lot. Yeah, I mean, that's cool.
And then the pandemic came, stopped flying. I went to online, and then British Airways offered my job back, and my online coaching was just growing so quickly. And I was like, I don't want to go back flying. I love this. And then did my counselling and life coaching course in CBT. Amazing. And then that's kind of ended me up here. So it's been a long journey. That's probably over the space of about 16 years, that journey.
Yeah, well, that's an amazing journey. I think if we sort of peel those layers back, then it actually starts from a really challenging place for you, quite a painful place from the sounds of it, when you talked about kind of the anorexia, and then sort of you mentioned there about eating for others rather than yourself, and then you mentioned the kind of relapse as well. What do you reckon was the kind of the drivers for the sort of the relapse side of things?
I think that what the first time when I ate more just to, you know, get the people off my back, it was when I didn't realise that this was, you know, a real like mental health kind of issue. And actually, the more I've studied this and looked at it, it is essentially an addiction. And it sounds odd because when you think you're not eating, you think, how is that an addiction? But it's an addiction to being restrictive. So, and what I've learned through psychology is addictions come from when we don't feel good enough within ourselves and we turn to something outside to make us try and feel better. And I see it as like, it was one thing in my life that time that I felt I could control. So everything else maybe felt out of control. And it was a weird thing because I was super successful. You know, I got A stars in all my GCSEs. I went to great schools, had a boyfriend. Like, on the outside, I have a lovely family. Everything looked great. But maybe I think a part of me was this perfectionism of like wanting to be the best. And almost when the eating disorder came, maybe there was a perfectionist element of like wanting to be the best at that. And it was this security. And then when I was like thinking in my head, well, if I eat, people will leave me alone, there was still a controlled element. So I was eating more but kind of controlling it. And then when I got to this stable weight, the psychiatrist on the NHS said, yep, your BMI is great, that's it, we'll stop all the therapy, you're fine. So then I was let go of, and everyone on the outside, I was pretending, you know, I was fine. And then at 19, I think it was just the patterns of the food started to come back in, and I was on my gap year, and just, I think because the actual issue hadn't been healed, and that's why I just fell back into the patterns again. And I think it's the same if you had an alcoholic drug addict, to be like taking the alcohol away, but not fixing why they were an alcoholic, and then they're going to probably end up drinking again. So it's like that, and then relapsing and actually saying, okay, I need to go to the root cause of where's this coming from, and heal and work on that. And the food will come into the place and start eating and stop restricting. It's interesting, as human beings we repeat the same unhelpful cycles over and over again until sometimes we get to a point where we just think, I can't go on repeating this time and time again. And the work that you've put in there with some real help and support has allowed you to get to the root of what was going on, because from the outside it looked like your life was really good. You said there about your education being good, the environment being good, but internally it's very different for you. Yes, and it was, I think obviously the more you go down that kind of route, it becomes more and more intense, because it's like there's more struggle around the food, and it's, you know, I was thinking 24/7 about it. And then, and you know what, the weird thing was, I've spoken to other people with eating disorders. Some people like being underweight, and actually they like, being they don't want to gain weight. I actually was the opposite. I hated how I looked. So I used to wear really baggy clothes, didn't want anyone looking at me. And I had a vision board on my wall, and I've actually kept it. And I had like bodies of women that I wanted to look like, and they were athletes and like plus size models. And I was like, I don't want to be skinny. I don't like being skinny, but it was just such a struggle to eat when it came to it.
I've never heard that line before. I've written it down, addiction to being restrictive, and it's a really interesting line because, of course, that makes sense, doesn't it? On the surface, you think when you're addicted to something, it's that idea about wanting more and more and more of it.
Yeah.
But actually, the addiction to being restrictive can be there as well, and that cycle being hard to break.
Yeah.
Do you work with other people now who are say addicted to things or have eating disorders? Is that a group of people that you work with to help?
Yeah, definitely. And it ends up normally that the client will come to me, say, for weight loss, and I start working with them, and we find out that actually there's some binge eating, emotional eating, that's an addiction.
Yes.
So then I will start working on that with them rather than just working on losing weight, say, because yes, I can help them lose weight, but we need to also work on that addiction to eating, because it's coming from a not great place. And actually they can then sort of try and get the validation for themselves by losing weight, thinking, I know when I'm a size, I'm now 10, I'll feel great.
Yeah.
But actually they'll get to size 10 and there'll be something else wrong. So we need to work on why they're binge eating and why they can't manage their emotions at the moment. What is the food giving them that they can't give themselves?
You mentioned body image earlier as well.
Yeah.
Is that something you see come up quite a lot? Is kind of how people view themselves and think about their own physique and own body?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like, and when someone directly comes to me, they want to lose weight, but further down within the coaching, when we're on that journey, I start to see those things come up. Like, I don't know, they might say that they don't feel confident enough to go on holiday or like wear a dress, etc. And we work on that. And obviously it's great when they can get to that place where they do and they tell me like, oh, I'm wearing a dress and I never used to wear dresses, or so that's really important. And actually I'm making at the moment a summer survival guide for my girls, and in it there is a whole summer confidence section about, wearing swimsuits, especially I made a lot of work with a lot of mums. Right. I think they're so focused on their children and they are like, oh well, yeah, I'll just cover up by the pool and I don't want anyone to look at me. And so really working on that over the summer as well.
You mentioned the emotional piece there as well. How much of a factor do you see that is of how people respond to their emotions and their just general sort of emotional awareness? How much of a factor do you see that in sort of health and well-being?
Yeah, I think that's a massive thing, because I think that what I notice is that when someone is stressed, I see it a lot, like in check-in forms, like I was really stressed, so I had loads of chocolate. Yeah. I was really stressed, so I had a bottle of wine. I was really stressed, so I couldn't eat healthy, or I couldn't go to the gym. And it's really interesting, because then I will try and explain to them that actually when you're stressed is working on managing that stress rather than going to something outside to try and fix it externally, because it actually doesn't, because you eat the chocolate and drink the wine, but that problem doesn't go away. You probably feel worse afterwards.
That's true.
It's these kind of acute coping strategies we have for stress, and whether they're helpful or hurtful, I suppose, is so contextual. Because on one side people say, oh, eating chocolate is bad. You're like, well, maybe it depends on the context and the goals and the individual. But it's sort of understanding the person, isn't it, and going, is this habit or behaviour or reaction helpful, hurtful? Is it serving you? Is it useful? And as you say there, one part of it is how we respond as human beings to our emotions, and sometimes when we're stressed we want to soothe those emotions and calm those emotions so we can understand it, but we also develop strategies, I suppose, to how do we actually move forward in a positive direction at the same time. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like you say, it's not that I'm not saying don't have chocolate, don't have wine. It's always about asking why, like, why am I being drawn to this? What is there? And sometimes, like, when I was working on healing myself relationship with food, it was almost too hard to sit with the feelings that came up. So like in my recovery, I suffered from binge eating and bulimia, and I had to literally, when I felt that urge to binge, I had to literally just sit there and do deep breathing, meditate, and stuff would come up, and it would be so hard to like, because it's like that pull. And so I can really relate to people when they're like, I just need that glass of wine, or I need that chocolate. But it is about just staying, if you can, in those feelings, and they will pass. And if you still want the glass of wine, have it, but just making sure you're not covering those emotions up, because they normally come back with vengeance or worse.
Yeah. So hard to do that at the moment, isn't it?
It
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
To sit with an emotion, you're like, oh, I've got to sit with this like feeling of stress or anxiety or whatever emotional experiencing. It's talk a lot about an acceptance commitment therapy as well, about being able to sit with an emotion and move forward in the presence of it. But it's I have empathy for people there, because it's something that I've really struggled with my own emotions.
Yeah.
And it is something that we all have to practice.
Yes.
I think about relationships as like relationships. Sorry,
Yes.
emotions like relationships. So I can't have a better relationship with anyone or anything if I don't spend time with it.
Yes.
So I can't have a better relationship with any emotion if I don't spend time with it.
Yeah,
and as human beings, we naturally just want to push away and suppress and comes to emotions. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But as you're saying there, it can be quite unhelpful if we try and develop better relationships, but better relationships with food, which is kind of what I'm hearing there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I think that sometimes in the moment we think that that's going to make us feel better, but then ultimately it doesn't. And that's why I do say this to girls, and sometimes it takes, practice and practice. But I think also that with drink and food, the hard thing is when it's normalised in society. If it is normalised that when we feel stressed, we have a drink. People literally will go, oh yeah, I had a hard day, have a glass of wine. And it's so normalised that then when you do the opposite, you think, oh, is this the right way? Like, should I be doing not having the drink? Or
Yeah, it really is a journey, isn't it? I think you were alluding to earlier about when you're coaching people, you'll start from one level and then you unpeel those layers over time.
Yeah.
I think the longer we have struggled with something, the longer the process needs to be to unpeel those layers.
Yeah, that's
and if you've had a persistent struggle, people expect to get some answers quickly and get it sorted in a couple of weeks or even a couple of months. And often if you're dealing with maybe stuff from childhood or whatever, it can really take a while, especially with the help of a therapist or coach, to get to some of those foundational root drivers as to why you are struggling. And sometimes it's those self-worth issues, self-esteem issues and body images and how we feel about ourselves.
Yeah.
It's such a big thing to sort of open up the conversation on for sometimes for people.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I always think now this conversation we're having, how important it is for personal trainers to understand this, because the sort of people we're helping from any demographic, and they'll come in with whatever their goal is. And I always think it's not for us to dictate that goal, but it's up to us to maybe unpeel some layers and understand why and work with them on that. And I think, I don't know what the courses are like now, but there was never enough done on psychology, certainly when I was starting out.
Yeah.
But would you say from your experience that actually understanding psychology and doing some education on it is almost an essential thing for personal trainers to be able to do, to really help people?
Yeah.
Not just the nutrition and the exercise.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I think definitely. And I think also working, I mean, maybe stereotypical, but working with women, because I think even like hormones, how much our emotions are always all over the place, and then beauty standards and diet culture on top of that. I think that there's a lot of psychology involved in the way that we eat and exercise and why we do it, and like you say, like the driving force. And I think without that understanding now, it's so difficult to deliver the service that people need or really help people understand it. And I always think it's not necessarily our place to change that goal, but maybe help them to understand why that goal is how it is. Yeah. And maybe allow them then to explore whether that's actually their goal or whether there's a deeper demeaning. Yeah. But I think it's almost definitely something for coaches and trainers. They need to be looking down this field. I know it's massively helped me. James went into this field way deeper than, way quicker than I have in terms of going into psychology. But even learning from him and then doing a few courses, it's a game changer in coaching, personal training, and just generally helping people, isn't it? Yes. Yeah.
Because otherwise our industry can almost exacerbate the problem.
Yeah, I think so.
Don't you think?
100%. Yeah.
Whether it's the standards we have with ourselves or maybe us wanting clients to achieve certain results for our results.
Yes, yeah. And
you see trainers do that all the time, right?
Yeah.
What led you down first into it initially?
Well, it's a mix, isn't it, of personal experience and professional experience. I always find when the two start to sort of give you the same sort of messaging, and you're like, I'm noticing things in my personal life, I'm noticing things in my professional life that I need to understand better. And ultimately it's understanding people better. Yeah. But I realise if I don't understand myself better, I can't understand people better.
Yes.
So I decided to go on a bit of a journey. And I just found, I don't know how you feel, Chloe, but I found like once I started to learn about psychology, it gave me so much extra like energy in life. And I was just like, I was doing some mentoring with Dan. I just like every session was going to be on psychology because I've decided that's what it's going to be. But I just found myself just getting more and more enthused and excited and motivated as I was learning it. So it's a subject that I feel very personally and professionally aligned to. I mean, what's your journey been like on learning about psychology? Because you've mentioned it already today, and there's sounds to me like it's something really close to your heart.
Yeah, exactly the same for me. And like, it's really hard to I do find it hard sometimes to explain to someone who hasn't gone down that route and studied it why it's amazing. And like you said, that you gave you more like energy for life, because you start to realise like, oh, I don't have to feel stressed all the time. I actually have the power to change this. And I think when we're in that state of like, I call it like a bit like victim mentality, or like where we feel we can't change anything and well, I'm just going to be this anxious person and nothing's going to change, and then we change it to I actually can, with work and practice, change how I think, change my thoughts, change my subconscious mind, all of that, and work on it, and my life could actually be a lot better, and I have the power. And I always say to my clients when I'm working with them on the therapy side, like, let's change it to I'm empowered to change this, rather than like, oh no, this is happening to me. I'm empowered and I can make the change. And it's not, and as I say to my weight loss clients as well, if we understand that life is not going to always go the way we want it, it actually becomes more relaxing, because we're like, oh yeah, it's not always going to go my way. That's okay though. I've accepted this and I can find a solution and move forward, rather than like, oh, why is this happening to me? This is terrible. Oh, now this has happened. And on the weekend I ruined my diet and ate too much. I know it's happened now, that's fine. We'll move on and make a plan, rather than getting really upset and becoming a victim almost to it. And I've ruined everything and now I'm really stressed. And so it transfers into the nutrition side as well.
It sort of knocks onto like every area of life, doesn't it? You've got like a underlying philosophy there, haven't you? Almost like a Stoic philosophy of there's challenges, things you can control, things you can't. There's a self-awareness side, that introspection there that we're talking about. And then there's the actual tools and strategies themselves. And you've gone into sort of CBT and learning more about like where your thoughts come from and your belief systems and your associated behaviours is an absolute life changer for everyone. You know, if you're struggling or not in every form of life, we can essentially have a better quality, more fulfilling life if we learn more about ourselves and in turn learn more about others. But sometimes it's not until we have a struggle, we have a challenge, that we start to look. Most people go into therapy as more of a reactive thing, which is great, and I'm really grateful that people do that, and I think therapy can do so much for people. I remember my first sort of therapy that I did was actually a proactive thing. I was learning about psychology. I thought, better do a bit of work on myself here, actually. I better look at myself here, tell other people out what they need to do. And I just found it fascinating to actually have the lens put on me for the first time as a coach. Because I was so busy focusing on others. It's to have that safe space where this was about me, to be able to talk freely and talk about my previous experiences in life. I found it just unlocked some doors. And things I just couldn't see, some blind spots and some unconscious parts of my mind that I wasn't even aware of until someone was to sit with me and ask me some really good questions. And
that's like essentially when you were saying about where mine's come from, working with that lady that I met at 19 who's still my coach, that's essentially where it started. And my mind at 19, some of the things she told me I couldn't quite comprehend. Now I'm older, there's a lot of stuff that we're repeating. I'm like, oh, now it makes more sense. But over time I've just studied more and more, and then like done my courses and done NLP, CBT, all of those things, and added to it. And then of course reading, like I just I'm constantly reading like spiritual leader books, and also just mindset books and podcasts and things like that. And I'm very fortunate that my partner, when I met him 4.5 years ago, I said, rather than wait till there's a problem in a relationship, would you be willing to come and meet, she's called Julia with me, I think you would love her, and work with her on your own, like not with me, just so you can become great. And he's I call him like the philosopher, he's into all that stuff, so it's great. So he did, and actually it's really helped our relationship because we communicate so well and so effectively, and we don't really go together, we go separately. It means we just are both working on ourselves so that when we come together we can talk about things very easily, and any issues are dealt with quite well. So obviously not all the time, like, but when there are things, it means that I can message her and say, like, I'm really rather than tell him, I just go to her and say, struggling with this thing with him, what's the best way to respond? Because I don't want to come across critical, and I don't want to tell him, he's wrong, because I understand, and she supports me with communicating effectively, and that's been like a game changer for us, because most people wait till you're going through a divorce and there's all these problems, and then they get the therapy. It's too late.
Well, that's beautiful. I love that. And from a relationship health perspective, what an incredible thing for you both to do your own individual work and better sort of see the benefit of that in your own relationship. And as you say, it's human nature, isn't it, to be reactive rather than proactive.
Yes.
But you having that passion, that drive for psychology, and then your partner also, that's just lovely to hear. And I think whether it's have a therapist or whether or not it's just read some personal development, but to be able to want to be the best version of yourself for you and in turn a relationship is incredible. But it takes that work, doesn't it? It takes two people wanting to be introspective, wanting to take responsibility, wanting to go, you know what, we haven't got all this stuff figured out. We're both carrying our own issues and our own problems, our own insecurities and our own flaws. Let's just try and figure out this messy, complex thing that we call relationships together. And it's a complicated thing and we never figure it out, but we're always making mistakes and we've always got these blind spots. But I love what you're saying there about doing the work and trying to figure it out together is beautiful, and I think probably quite rare.
I was going to say that's rare, isn't it? Because most people, you get to that point where it's a blow up before you even discuss it, and then it's not communicated in the right. It's kicked off again.
Dan's kicked off again.
It's kicked off, but it's not. Then it's not communicated in the right way because you're both coming from. You're both angry or upset or whatever the situation is. So you're never going to communicate well in that moment, are you? And actually to do it that way, and actually to give yourself the breathing space to be able to speak to your coach. And obviously your partner working with a coach as well. That is incredible and actually probably incredibly rare because there's certain things we just expect to go well. Do you know what I mean? You just expect a relationship to work and these things are inevitable, but actually they don't have to be. And I think that's a really cool message.
And actually they're the one person, they're so close to you and they know everything about you. And as I always describe it, they're like a mirror. So if you imagine you've got your mirror in front of you, they are reflecting back all of your stuff. They trigger you the most than anyone else. So they're actually, we always say to each other, it's a great place to do the work, your relationship, because that is where you're going to see all the bits you don't like about yourself that no one else sees when you get angry or stressed or whatever.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Couldn't agree more. I think that's really well said.
It is really well said.
I think our relationships, our romantic and also our any sort of personal relationship, friendships, are one of the best ways we can learn about ourselves. And this all links together our conversation so far about whether it's food, whether it's relationships. When someone or something brings something up in us, that's a chance to go, why clients? Exactly. Why am I clients? Don't talk about Chloe. But we have this psychodynamic psychology talk about transference and counter-transference, essentially bringing our own stuff into that conversation, our own trigger, and then sort of projecting it onto other people, which as human beings we always do. But it's great to take a step back and go, wow, why is that person making me feel like that? Or why is that situation making me feel like that? And if you've got a counsellor or a coach to guide you through that, it then sort of makes you prioritise the time. Because often people on the treadmill of life, we're all guilty for not taking a step back and working too much and not working on self-care. It's easy to go down that path. But when you're booked in for that time, I mean, for you've had this support for a long time now. You are prioritising this self-care and time for you. I mean, at the moment, since my business has grown a lot in the last year, I've actually seen her more off the back of that, because I said to her, I'm dealing with so many people every week, over 100 clients, and that's a lot of people to potentially bring, things up and stuff. And I want to always respond that effectively to my clients and not, because you might have someone who's messaging you out of hours. And I want to reply in a nice way and not get like, don't message me.
Of course.
I'm stressed. And working with her and actually I've worked with her more, and she's a lot of money. Like, it's not cheap. She's probably, one of my biggest expenses in life. But I believe that's the most important thing, because what's more important than wanting to be happy? Like, because I know that materialism and money won't make me happy. Like, however well my business does or however much money I make. So actually spending it on her rather than buying a new car is more important to me. So that's my biggest, and just like we say to our clients, it's like the biggest investment is our physical health. So should our mental health be as well.
What I'm interested, Chloe, is like listening to you. I can hear you mentioned about your childhood. Then I can hear and see a really driven, motivated, perfectionist woman here who wants to grow and develop. How do you kind of balance that out with the high standards and pressure you put upon yourself to exercise, to eat well? How do you sort of reconcile? Does that make sense, that question? Because I can hear it can be a tough balance for you to try and want to succeed, want to push, want to help others have the best possible life, but obviously being someone who's clearly wants to be maybe a perfectionist, maybe still being there with you as well. How do you sort of balance that out now?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I'm working on with her, which is actually to just be doing basically nothing, like to just be okay with just doing nothing. And also she even said to me to be okay with the fact that you could lose, not that I'd want to do this, but say that it's okay if I lost my business tomorrow, that it would be okay. If everything fell apart, you know, I would be okay. And actually something we've been working on is making sure I spend time in my day where I just sit, and you could call it meditation, whatever you want, but basically just doing nothing. And because I know people might say, well, you need to relax and watch TV. I actually don't really agree that that's, you know, the best thing that for people. I don't know if that would be the best thing for me, to sit and just watch Netflix. I actually think it is to sit and just chill and do nothing. So yeah, that is something that I have to almost make an effort to do nothing. Because otherwise I will be like, oh, I've got a spare hour, I'll work on my business, or I'll do this.
I think it's a really good point in regards to the Netflix thing, because actually it's just another distraction. It's like having a phone, isn't it? But how, and I do talk to clients about this a lot, how comfortable are you just in the moment to do nothing? I actually mentioned your silent retreat to someone the other day, which we'll go into more detail in a minute, but is what it says on the tin, doesn't it? Silent retreat. And the client I was talking to was like, I couldn't do that. Now that was, how many days was that, your silent retreat that you went on?
2 days, couple of days.
2 days of complete silence. And she was saying I couldn't even do that for half an hour. But I thought that was quite interesting, and I just tried to reflect that back to her in terms of not having your phone, but not being distracted by TV. Because in reality, TV is just another distraction. It's still something that's taking you away from your own thoughts or emotions, not being able to sit in it. But I think that's a really important point, because can it be something to relax with? Maybe, but it's not. It's still not just sitting and being silent and just understanding your own thoughts in that moment, is it?
Yeah,
I think it's a really great point.
And it's one of the things, again, with like food and weight loss, is like one of the things I try and say is, can you try at least one meal a day? And if you can't do 1 meal a day, 1 meal a week, and just sit at the table in complete silence with no TV and no phone, and just sit with your food, because so many people can't do it.
Great task.
And that's why I believe, I mean, and I even say sometimes to girls, like, if you don't want to look at what you're eating, start with that, because it will help you lose weight. Because when we're watching TV and on our phone and eating, our brain can't register whether we're hungry, full, whether we're enjoying the food, do we like it, what does it taste like, and then we just eat and eat. You know, when you sit there just eating popcorn and you don't even know. Like,
where's all that gone? Who's eating my popcorn? You have, James.
It's that mindless eating, isn't it? Where you're literally just. I think that's I really like that task, actually. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I find it hard, because I also, being like a business owner, I'll be like, oh, I'll just reply to emails whilst I eat my lunch or whatever.
It's different for me. I think what I'm hearing there is ultimate mindfulness. Being present in the here and now, in this current moment. You mentioned quickly earlier on about like spiritualism. You mentioned some breath work and meditation. I'm really curious and really interested in your sort of journey with these types of things, and how they've helped you in your personal life and professional life.
Yeah, I mean, Julia, my therapist, she did introduce me to some like particularly spiritual books. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Osho. He's a spiritual leader, but there was a documentary on Netflix about him, which I think was a bit biased, but
I get it, like as in harsh.
Yeah, and it was, I don't really agree with what was said on it, like, because he was a huge spiritual leader, and there's so many books of his, because he didn't write books, he did speeches, and people would just, the weird thing was, this is why people don't like him, because they see it as a cult, but people would hoard to listen to him. I personally think it's because he had great things to say, and he was Indian, so the people have transcribed his books into English, and I've read probably about 5. I've just literally bought one called Being in Love, which is all about love, so love with friendships, but particularly relationships, without what we call normal, which is like jealousy, resentment, expectation, all these things that come with relationships, which are actually not normal. That's not true love if you're jealous of someone or have all these expectations. And it's a book about teaching you how to love. But my first encounter with his book was Love, Freedom and Aloneness. So there's a whole section on love, a whole section on freedom and aloneness, and how important all those things are for our life. And when I read that, I was like, I just love this. And then read loads of his other books. And also I listened to Ram Dass. I don't know if you've heard Ram Dass spiritually. I've listened to old recordings of his, and just they really resonate with how I think and how I wish that like it could reach the whole world, because I do believe if the whole world could listen to this, the world would be an incredible place if we became more conscious. Obviously there's a lot of unconsciousness in the world at the moment.
So how has this stuff sort of helped you in your life?
I guess it's helped me with the way that I respond to people, clients, maybe my belief in myself, even belief in my business and how I do things, and that knowing that I'll be okay, because there's always like that thing of, oh, will I be okay, or am I we were talking about before my childhood. I think a lot of it comes from I need to be good enough, because I was quite successful when I was younger and great at school. Of course my parents then said, well done, you're doing great, and there was a lot of, then I think as a child I internalized that as I need to keep that up, I need to keep doing well. And my sister wasn't very academic, but I was. There was a lot of like, well done, that's excellent, and they're lovely of course, but they'd always say, you're really proud. And I think I was always like, I need to do well, so that wanting to succeed, which was great, it's got me a good business and all of that, but actually reading these books and listening to spiritual leaders and knowing that I'm okay, like I'm just fine how I am, not with all that stuff and all those things that those people that tell me that I'm great, I'm actually just okay. I think those books have really, and listening to those spiritual leaders have really helped me with that.
And sort of change your identity a little bit, because it's easy to place our identity on a lot of material items, and learning more about sort of spiritual way of things, it's peeling all those layers away and go, my identity isn't real, my stories I tell myself aren't real, the stories I tell about who I am, what I'm capable of, my beliefs, it's all in my own mind. And learning more about the spiritual side allows us to peel all those layers, all that noise, and sometimes all that pressure away, and it is quite freeing.
Yeah, it is.
And if you lose everything and you lose your business, or you lose money, you go through difficult times, you can always come to the root and go, I'll be okay.
Yes.
And I can totally sort of relate and resonate with that.
Yeah.
And you sort of, it's easier to sort of not lose your way.
Yes.
And not validate yourself on what you think other people think of you, or what you need to have from material perspective. It sort of takes all that away.
And because we now live in a society where it is so, especially with social media, like you see people sitting in their nice cars or like all their fancy stuff, and then you think, or even successful businesses, and you think, I've got to get that, that's what I've got to do, I've got to get 1 million followers, because then everyone will love me, and then I've got to have this much money, and I've got to have this perfect relationship, and it puts so much pressure on yourself. But like you say, if you realise, actually don't need any of that to feel good, I can just feel good now. Obviously it takes work, but you don't actually need. And that was actually something that Julia said to me when I was about 22, when I was learning all this stuff. She said, Chloe, if you don't heal, I know you will be successful in life materialistically. I know what you're like, you'll earn money, you'll probably have a great big house, whatever. She said, you'll be sitting in your big house with your business, but you won't feel good. You'll still feel how you feel today when I was 22 if you don't work on this and let that all kind of go. And she said, you can live in this world that we live in and have all those nice things. It's fine to have money and be successful, but like you say, you've got to be okay with just letting it go and just being okay with who you are.
And you should say that happiness is a choice.
Yes.
Happiness is, and if we make our happiness conditional, we're always chasing it. I'll be happy, like you were saying right at the beginning of today, I'll be happy when I've dropped a dress size. I'll be happy when. And you get to that place and you go, I need this next thing now. I need this next thing, because you're always wrestling with this kind of low self-esteem. You never really get to a place of that full confidence or belief or acceptance in yourself.
Yes.
And I'm really curious on the breathwork side of things as well, because these are all things that I've been sort of on a bit of a journey myself with over the last few years. And I think when it comes to creating space and working through emotions and working through difficult times and even working through trauma, I think some of these different approaches can really have their place for so many people. And I think we're in a world right now where most people aren't really prioritising self-care. It's all surface level self-care. And to really do the work, as we say, and I've said on the podcast before, the work can be so many different things. But something I've experienced is breath work, and some of the experiences I've had through breath work has been quite incredible. I mean, I'm really interested in your experience with breath work and why you do it and why you think it's important.
So I think my first encounter with breathwork was Wim Hof. So doing the power breathing, is it 30 40 rounds of power breathing and then the breath holds during lockdown. So 2020. I did it a lot, and I remember doing one night where I just lay on the living room floor and it was getting dark, and I did it for 45 minutes, and I think my last breath hold was about 4 minutes, and then at the end I sat up and I was like, oh my god, I literally feel like I'm on drugs. I felt incredible. And towards the end, I was doing these visualizations like of my future and, you know, how I feel, and doing, you know, all my affirmations and all of that, and just, kind of all my worries literally felt like I was just letting go, and like, just, you know, I was saying to myself, you're okay, like, you're okay, Chloe. And it was incredible. And then I was like, oh, this is so good, and it's free, and it's good for me. And, you know, then you start to research it, and I was looking up how it's good, you know, for your immune system, and like all these other benefits. And I just kept it up, and then studied it more, realised that there's loads of other breathwork like techniques that you can do. And that was the time when then I'd actually, just after COVID, started my life coaching course, which had a section on breathwork as well. So started learning other techniques, and then more in-depth meditation linked to breathwork. And then we went to Mexico, and I did psychedelic breathwork, which was, I can't remember his name, but the guy who invented it was when LSD got banned, and he wanted to create a breathwork that had the same effect. Right. So we did that in a place in Tulum, and your hands go into claws, you're lying on the floor, waking up with your hands above your head without even realising, and it's just a complete out of body experience. It was that
sounds
was
really
incredible.
cool.
Yeah
It's cool.
Yeah, it was incredible. And the leader was really good, because when we were all at the end in this altered state, she was reading to us like an inner child meditation, and you could like tell it was really going in. And there were quite a lot of men there, and they were all, you know, everyone was crying at the end. Like, it was a really good, she said, just let the emotions out. And then I started, as you said, doing my own breath work, and that was actually classes. That was off the back of, I had an event in February with my local clients. So there was about 25, 30 of us in a studio, and I said to them before the event, would you like me to do some breath work for just 10 minutes? And they're like, yeah, we'll do it. So we did, I think it was about 15 minutes, and I had some really nice, you know, relaxing music, and I just did deep power breaths with them, and then breath holds. And then towards the end, I was reading them like just some affirmations, and was telling them to let go and release the tension out of the body, all this. 2 girls got up halfway through and walked into the room like in tears, but in a good way. They were all crying. Loads of girls were picking up, you know, tissues, wiping their eyes. And these are, I'd say the age group was probably late 20s to 50. And at the end, so many came up to me, like hugging me. One girl said, I have to go, like in a good way. She was like, that just brought up so much for me, and really thank you so much. And then afterwards, the girl said in the group, can you hold these more often? So I just said, okay. So now it's just a fortnightly thing. I just charge, you know, £8, because I don't want much for it, because I think it's so good for people. And the girls had just said that they just love that they can just lie there, like we were just saying, for an hour and do nothing. No phone, no TV, just lying, doing breath work, meditation. And that's, basically how it kind of all started. And then I obviously continued to do it myself as well. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's you've done breathwork class, haven't you? It's one of those things that I've been meaning to do for a long time, because since you took it, another couple of the trainers were talking about it. But you've inspired me with that to really want to do it, because I've heard how powerful it is.
I think, you know what, with this stuff, I think it is very individual as well, isn't it? And I think first of all, there's an open mindset. I think when I was younger, quite a closed mindset, if I'm honest. I'm like, this isn't for me. I don't need any of this stuff. Yeah. And it's not until you actually experience something, and we spoke about this before, Dan, haven't we, about actually being open-minded to have a new experience. And when you go into it, and things with breath work or even meditation or any of these things, is to try and sort of let all those judgments go and all those kind of expectations of yourself, and just to be in the moment and to try and relax fully. And that's something that I've really struggled with for a while. I had this kind of guard up, this sort of tension up. I found it hard to kind of really let my guard down.
Yes.
And as I did, and as I did a little bit more sort of breath work and gave myself the space, and you've got some music, and it depends on the instructor, it depends on your mood at the time and your state. Yeah. So many variable factors here. But I had some experience which was a lot more kind of sort of buzzy, I suppose, and other experiences that were a lot more kind of highly emotional and quite sad, and some which maybe was a bit more neutral. So it's really interesting, isn't it? It's sort of, I always say, especially meditation teaches you this, not to have any expectations. I should feel like this, I'm going to get this from this. Go and sit with an open mind, and it's amazing when you do that, you almost become open to whatever the experience is. And once you do that, and almost like a life philosophy again, really, that's a great way to think about life, isn't it? As well as much as a breathwork class, it will be what it will be, and I'm going to be open to whatever presents itself in this hour.
Yeah, and I think that the group, I think situations have really big energy. I actually forgot that we went to a couple of festivals last year, which both had breath work, and one of them, Wim Hof, was actually there, and there must have been about 300 people or so. But when we all did it, it was just, the energy was just incredible. I mean, a couple of people did. It was quite funny. It was a no alcohol, no drugs festival. A couple of people collapsed doing the breath work.
Oh, really?
They took the paramedics out, and we were all joking that, like, at most festivals, it's like the alcohol and drugs, they had the paramedics, but it was the breath work.
Yeah, you find I remember doing one breath work where they had music playing at the same time as doing the breath, and I tell you what, it's a great night out.
I
was like, no alcohol, and I was loving it.
Yeah.
So it's again, these whole different experiences I think are really good for our personal growth. Whether or not you think it's something you want to do regularly or not, I think just being open-minded enough to experience something new and give it a go, give it a shot, and it's amazing when you do that what can happen and what can come up.
Is it one of those things? Again, I'm going to guess the answer is it depends. But in a group setting like that was obviously a large group, but actually the energy from the group is really powerful. Do you get as much from sort of individual breath work as a group breath work, or would you prefer like in a big group?
I might like you were saying, James. Like, I think it depends on the day. Even, you know, sometimes I do it on my own. And I'm like, oh, this is so boring.
Yeah,
like, I feel rubbish. And sometimes I do it on my own. I'm like, oh, this feels great. Like, I'm feeling so good. And so I think it does depend. But I mean, I do think that having the group, there is a big energy element of everyone.
That connection with people together.
Yeah, that collective thing. And I do really believe that, like, humans, we are meant to be in like tribes and communities, and we're so disconnected now that maybe even something like that has to do with us being together. And I do think that the reason I've kept it female only is because there's something about, I think a lot of the girls, there's clearly, when I'm doing these affirmations and saying, you know, let go of your fear and lack of, you know, self-worth, there's a lot of stuff there that women hold, and, you know, letting it all out and being able to cry and feel okay.
Yeah.
I think even that, like, one girl hears another lady crying and thinks, oh, okay, you know, it's okay to cry. I let my emotions out. Yeah,
it's like permission, isn't it, to go, it's okay. I think it's two pieces that come to mind there, but the biggest one I think is the connection side of things and the community side, and you're sort of alluding to there, almost that sort of modern society sort of pulls us away from connection, pulls us away from depth with ourselves, which is what we're talking about today, but also with others, to make time to truly connect with other people and really communicate on a deeper level. It can be hard because we're full of distractions, we've got things to do, and sometimes when we lack that foundational human need, we can feel quite unhappy or quite lonely or just quite disconnected with the world or ourselves. Is that something you've seen with clients or even yourself, when people just don't feel connected or they don't feel like there's a sense of belonging or community or understanding in their lives?
Yeah, I do see it. And I think a lot on the kind of therapy side I see people saying, you know, anxiety, feeling lonely, etc. And like you're saying, I think that we feel like we don't have enough time as well, maybe to connect with our friends, but I think we do have a lot of time. There's just a lot of distractions, so where there's a lot of time wasted. You know, people will say to me, I haven't got time, as we know, to exercise, but they'll happily watch Netflix every night for that. So there is time, it's just there's a lot of distractions. And I think the best currency, like the most richest currency that's going to be now for the next probably 30 years with AI is discipline. I think if you are not disciplined in the next 30 years, you're going to be pulled by distractions, because they are everywhere, like phones, there'll be the headset soon, just, you know, there's just so much alcohol, food, technology, and so we have to be disciplined and actually be able to put those things down, and then we'll feel more relaxed, maybe not feel as lonely because don't feel so isolated, have more time to spend with family and friends. And like we were saying earlier, prioritizing as well, like, okay, it's actually not important if I don't do this job today, I'm going to go see my mum instead. You know, I don't need to see this client or, you know, make this money today. I'll go, you know, see my mum and spend time with my family.
It's like the best compliment you can give someone, the best gift you can give someone is your time. Your fully focused time. And that's one thing that, one reason why me and Dan love this podcast is there's no distractions. It's just fully focused on good quality conversation, and we always walk out of a podcast feeling great. It's amazing. You know, you feel like you've almost done a workout. Really, you feel energized, you feel clear, you feel less stressed, and you're right. We give ourselves these narratives and excuses that we don't have time. But if we look at, Harvard University did the longest ever study on human health and happiness, and the biggest correlation to people who live longer, happier, healthier lives was quality, healthy relationships.
Yeah.
And part of a quality, healthy relationship is good quality understanding and connection. And it does take time, energy and focus, but it's probably some of the most worthwhile energy you can ever put into your life.
Yeah.
Because without that, what have you got?
Yeah,
You could have the material success, you could have the business, but you haven't really, you're missing a key component of what it is to be human.
Yeah.
You were talking about, earlier about a lot of people being unconscious going through life at the minute. And you think about what people think with connections with people. And they'll maybe spend time with people, but how many times are you in a restaurant and you'll see a couple both on their phones?
Yeah.
Or a group of friends and they're all on their phones.
Yeah.
So they might be sat together, they might be in the same place, but actually the connection there's not much connection or deep conversation, or sometimes even superficial conversation going on, because they're distracted. And so you have this on this sort of surface level, you think you're spending time with friends or partners or clients. But if that person is constantly distracted or isn't really giving someone that real sort of their real attention, then actually it's not connection at all, just because you're in the same space.
Yeah.
So are you able to, like my partner and I, like when we're at a restaurant, we don't have our phones out.
Yeah.
And if on the odd occasion, and mostly probably me,
Just check the results quickly.
it's like put it down.
Half an hour later, Instagram scrolling along.
Bad, isn't it? 'Cause it's that, and I do it unconsciously.
Yeah.
And so most of the time we're very good, but every now and then you'll unconsciously pick it up. But if someone's not bringing you back into that moment, it's so easy to think you've gone and connected with someone, or you're going to say sit with your parents, but you're sat on your phone, or you're just watching the telly. Yes, you've been in the same room as someone, but that's not the same as connection. And I think the reason you go back to the podcast is there is no distraction.
Yeah.
Like the phones are away. There's nothing we can do except talk and listen to each other. And that's why, you come out of the podcast and you feel better.
And you can tell when someone's fully paying attention, can't you? You can tell when someone's really picking up what you're saying and they're with you. They're fully present. I feel like meditation helps you with that, because meditation is about being centered in the here and now. Does take practice.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the first time you do it, like I was all over the shop for 10 minutes there. And then gradually over time, again, there's no right or wrong way to meditate, but I do think it's a skill.
Yeah.
And it is a skill that we can get better at, being as focused and as present in the here and now, because that's really all we have, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, even with coaches, sorry mate, I just want to get that. Even with coaches,
you cut me off, mate.
I will cut you off. I will let you finish. It popped straight. As coaches, we should be doing that. Because you think some of our clients, especially with the life coaching side of things that you guys do, that hour that you give them or they come and see you for could be one of the only hours that week where they have the full attention of someone on them. Yeah. Where they can then discuss whatever it is that gets discussed during that hour. But there is no distraction, be it them being distracted or whoever they're talking to being distracted. Yeah. But even on the gym floor, which is more where I'm based, one of the big things about my service, I want to give that person my full attention. Yeah. And if they're not, and that's fine if they don't give me their full attention because it's their hour, but they've got my full attention and we'll discuss whatever they need to discuss. So even as coaches, I think it's important on just a basic level that we give that person full attention.
Yeah.
And active listening as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Which is different, isn't it? To like me being quiet and paying attention, but actively listening and engaging in every word. Well, I mean, you probably know what it's like, Chloe. It's a lot of work, isn't it? You have to really be in a very good place yourself. I suppose all the work that you put in and around your own self-care allows you to be in a bit of work for your clients. It's almost like for you taking that as a responsibility to go, the work you put in directly impacts your life, but also your client's life.
Yes, yeah. And actually, when you say about the active listening, something that, I've used it in my relationship, but then I've started now using it in my business as well, that my therapist taught me, is something called intentional dialogue, which is where you actually practice repeating back what someone has just said before you respond. So they would say, even, can you pass me the remote? Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you would like me to pass you the remote. Here you go. Because a lot of people, and you'll notice it, especially in relationships, we get terrible at listening and whatever, on your phone, not really. And it plays a massive part in our connection with our partner. So actually really listening and more so in tension, like in arguments, we really try and do it, and actually listening to what they're saying rather than going, no, you're wrong, I'm right. It's actually going, they're saying, no, I don't want to do the bins today. Okay, so you don't want to do the bins today because you feel that it's, and actually listening to what they're saying. And then with clients, it's, I really don't feel like I can do this exercise because I really don't like it. Okay, so you really don't like this exercise. You don't feel that you like it, you know, and really, so they feel heard rather than, no, you've just got to do it because I told you so.
Yeah.
It's good for you.
That's such an amazing point. I think, to be able to repeat back what you've heard. And for some people, they say to me, it sounds a bit artificial. I'm like, just try it or paraphrase what you've heard. And the way that unlocks conversation is unbelievable. And also what you're alluding to there is being able to understand someone else a little bit better.
Yeah.
And we can only see the world through our own lens.
Yeah.
And then we assess that information for our own biases, which is based on our own previous experiences and our own assessments and judgments of the world. It's how our brains work. Yeah. So to think someone else is going to see the world exactly how we do, it's probably pretty unrealistic. But we all get a bit frustrated when someone don't. You're like, what do you mean they see it how I do? Well, the way I see it's right. You're like, well, why? Just that's what you believe. Yeah. And in relationships, it's so difficult, isn't it? You know, and I've been there loads of times throughout the years. I've plenty of relationship struggles myself, and hopefully I try and learn through those experiences, and I'll still make mistakes going forward, but actually going that there's another person here with a different perception, a different set of circumstances, different whole life experiences to me. They're going to see it differently. And I know it sounds a bit silly to talk about that, about putting the bins out, but actually different people might have different values and different priorities, and one person it might be important, another person not. And it's not until you discuss that and take away the assumptions that we should get anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. I did want to add as well, when you were saying about the phones, a really good thing to practice is actually having, if you obviously a non-working day, but actually having a day if you can have your phone off, because that's a real interesting, like, almost it is an investigation, like to see how much you, and obviously no TV as well, and just see how much you are so used to reaching, especially when you are with your partner, because you'll find that sometimes they'll go and do something and you're so used to going, oh, I just got my phone, like, or when you're waiting in a queue and actually just having to stand there and go, I'm just waiting in the queue, or like on a train. And
absolutely.
You're sort of fighting the urge again, Chloe, aren't you?
Yeah.
You can feel your, as Dan was saying, you reach for your pocket and automatically your phone comes out.
Yeah. Dan
alluded to something I did over the New Year period, which was a silent retreat.
Oh, wow.
And an incredible experience, and it sort of really consolidated some sort of personal development that I was working on last year. And there's obviously no technology. There's including the title there. It's a silent retreat. She's not even talking to anyone. It's amazing because you still have that community feel. So you're around other people, you still eat together. Straight away in silence, you eat slower, you eat more mindfully. You're a lot more self-aware on what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Everything you do is naturally more mindful. The walks we did in nature for a couple of hours, the meditation seemed to be deeper, the yoga was better. That whole experience was almost heightened through the silence. And it was incredible how often we are in this kind of automated, conditioned sort of behaviour in society, and our phones, we can all relate to this now, can't we? We use technology too much, and we don't even realise how much it's taken over our world. And to have a moment of peace, whether it's meditation or even a retreat, is so enlightening. It really is, and it allows you to kind of almost get a bit of a clearer head. I don't think I've ever felt so relaxed after those 2 days, because my whole nervous system was like, you know, all the stresses in life felt like they sort of faded away, because you can really just get present again, really. Because
otherwise you're just, we're constantly like go, you know, like we were saying with the food, and you're present with the food. And when you think about the impact that would have on, you know, someone, who's got a bad relationship with food, and actually just sitting and being there and in silence is, so powerful.
I think with all these things as well, and so that me and Dan trying to do the podcast is obviously have a practical element as well. I'm sure a big part of coaching, isn't it? People might want to go on a silent retreat, and that's great, but it's just a weekend. What do we do, and how do we translate that into the real world is really important. You work with obviously mainly women. What are some of the kind of struggles and the challenges that you see women kind of experience more so?
I think the most common is like general anxiety day to day. Not just a constant not feeling good enough in their bodies, in themselves. And then emotional eating is very common. I don't know if that's just off the back of me working with a lot of weight loss clients, then obviously it comes down to the eating. But emotional eating, and just lack of self-confidence and anxiety, I think, are the biggest that I notice. So turning to food when they don't feel good, over-consuming, not knowing when to stop, not really understanding like what hunger and fullness is. And then just general anxiety and not feeling confident day to day.
It's difficult unless you've got that person in front of you, but do you have some sort of, we're going to give some people some sort of actions. Have you found any in particular that you found quite successful for people if they're looking to sort of break that cycle in any way?
I mean, definitely, I'd say the first thing, if you want like a practical thing, a lot of the stuff is the inner work you have to do on yourself, and every person is going to be different as to why they emotionally and they need to manage those emotions. But if it was a practical thing, I'd say to start with is that any time you feel that pull to like overeat and eat, just stop. So if you can put a timer on your phone for 5 minutes, and then say at the end of 5 minutes, I am allowed to binge eat if I want to, but first I'm going to go and sit down and just sit in silence, no distractions, and just work out whether I really want to do this. So am I hungry? Oh, I am actually hungry. Okay, I will have something to eat. Or no, I'm not. I'm eating because there's another reason here. It could be a habit. I'm so used to binge eating at 4 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Or is there an emotional pull? Is there something else going on that I'm dealing with? And give yourself that time. If you then say, I'm going to do it anyway, then do it with full conviction and say, I'm going to allow myself to binge eat. I'm going to eat as much as I want, or emotionally, whatever you want to call it. And I'm not going to feel guilty for that because I've chosen to do it. Because guilt is just as bad, and that plays into it as well, because then we do it. Oh, I'm so terrible. I've done this. I'm so awful. Then that goes down a whole other negative loop. So I'm going to do it. When I'm done, that's it. And during the binge, saying to yourself, I'm doing this I want to do this. I've chosen to do this. I'm not, victim to this. I'm choosing to do it. And then also, if we decide not to do it, then actually seeing if we can sit with those feelings. And sometimes I might say to a client, if you're able to, it depends if you've got children, but if you can shut a door, smash a pillow, bang a pillow, if you can go for a drive and scream in the car, like get those emotions out, cry, write, have a shower, bath, anything. You may have to use like distractions to start with, like having a shower, going for a walk, maybe using your TV if you need to get out of that loop, but eventually being able to sit and get those emotions and clear them out. And of course, if you're hungry, I'm not saying don't eat and don't have the cake or whatever, but it's being able to see if you can test that pull towards it, just like we're testing putting to our phone or whatever it might be. And then if it's also, and the other thing I would also say is to trying to eat the food without distractions. I just think that's such a huge thing for people, because I do notice that a lot of people, I ask them when they binge eat, are you watching TV or on your phone while they do this? And a lot of the time it is yes. I'm sitting in the front of the TV binging. Try binging without the TV. It's a lot harder. Like actually just sitting there and just eating in silence. A lot of the time, like you found when the silent retreat, it would probably be quite hard to binge in that silent retreat. You probably wouldn't want to, because you're so connected with the food and you're eating slowly and enjoying it and really present.
Yeah,
that's the thing with sitting with it, isn't it? You're making it more of a conscious thing rather than a subconscious thing of it's just something you do, say at 4 o'clock, and you almost just do it out of pure habit. To actually just sit there 5 minutes, you're at least bringing it into the conscious and bringing yourself aware.
Yeah,
it's one of the things I've really tried to do in the last couple of years since working with James is, when I feel an emotion, it's actually trying to sit and understand it and just ask myself a couple of questions as to why. It's nothing major, but I try and do that more and more, and then it becomes almost more automatic. Like, at least I'm going to sit and try and understand that a little bit more before there is a reaction on whatever the emotion, positive or negative.
Yeah.
And it's that similar sort of thing there, isn't it? So at least become conscious of what you're feeling, and not just this is automatically happening. I see it a lot. I see a lot of clients with alcohol as well, which is probably more of the clients I see. It isn't necessarily on the binge eating side, but certainly more on the drinking every night side, that maybe you want to stop, but it's such an automatic response. And I think that's a great tip, and definitely someone that people can use almost straight away, can't they? And just go,
you could
try
use
it today.
For anything. You could use that tip, everything I've said, for alcohol, for your phone, for TV, put a timer on, and just see if you can wait and stop before you go to do it.
Helps you kind of develop a bit more control, maybe become less of a slave to your emotions. Because we're talking about really quite a lot today, actually, about developing emotional intelligence. And one part of that is awareness. When you stop and you pause between an emotion and a reaction, there's that space to choose. And that's what you're saying, Chloe, isn't it? There's a choice here, and if you choose to do whatever behaviour, it's not right or wrong. but you go into that with, I think the word you use, conviction. You do that and you go into that and you make the most of that and you enjoy that experience. And then to try not to have that judgment and shame of yourself afterwards, because that becomes like a negative cycle that goes around, and you feel shameful and you judge yourself. I'm not worthy, I shouldn't be doing this. You let yourself down again. James, you bloody idiot. You've done it again. And then I feel worse about myself, and I'm more likely to do it again and again. And that's a real key part of this, isn't it? The kind of the self-judgment of ourselves, the pressure of ourselves to be perfect, to be great, to be at a high level, to never make a mistake. And sometimes just taking the pressure off and have permission to go, none of us are perfect. We all know we don't always act perfectly in line with our values. We all make mistakes. We don't react perfectly to our emotions. Just to take that pressure off and give ourselves all a bit of permission to not be perfect. I think it's something to be said about that.
And it's huge, and it's actually one of the things I say at the beginning of my coaching when someone starts is I say, in your first week, I do not want you to do everything I tell you to do. And actually through the whole coaching, if you just do 60%, that's great. I do not want you to do 100%, because then there's this pressure of, oh, well, I didn't do the steps that Chloe told me to do, so I'm now just going to eat all the chocolate because I can't do it.
All or nothing.
All or nothing, So not being the perfectionist, and actually, and then you don't judge yourself. And I say, just do 50%, because they are, people will be hard on myself. Oh, I didn't do well this week, so I didn't lose a pound. And it's like, actually, no, you did do well, because you did 10,000 steps every day. But otherwise, if you put all these pressures, and then you, like you say, you then judge yourself, and then it goes into a negative cycle. You give up, you don't do your workouts, you don't eat well. And
how do you find that, Chloe?
What, for myself?
Yeah, for yourself. How
that's actually on my list of stuff. Is actually your goals.
I'm really curious. I'm curious on how you get on with this kind of relationship of yourself, because obviously, being very focused. How you manage it?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something I work on every single day. As in, I have to work on it because I find it hard. So I put these expectations of, oh yeah, I've got to get to here, or I've got to get to here. And something that really resonated with me recently was actually just saying, my therapist said to me, but why do you have to do that this year? Why can't you do that in 5 years? Why do you want to do all these things now? Like, you've got loads of time, you've got your whole life. And I was like, oh yeah, don't have to do it all now. And like being relaxed about that, and also not being in a rush even to be perfect in the sense of being healed, like, and being this perfect person who never reacts and never gets stressed and everything is great and always being happy, like taking that pressure off and being kind to myself. But it is, it's a very conscious thing that I have to do every day, because I can be very critical that I'm not doing, oh no, I didn't react the right way to that, or I should have said that. So it's a constant thing of no, it's okay. And actually, I think having a partner, I'm very lucky, who does the work. He's great, because I will say things like, oh, well, I didn't do well with X in my business this week, and then he's like, no, and it's not that, no, you're doing well, because that can be quite annoying when people say that. No, you're fine.
Because being a bit patronising, like cheerleader. Keep going, you're doing so well. You're like, you're not really listening to me, are you?
No, he'll actually say, I think you need to talk to your little Chloe, your inner child, and actually just tell her that she's doing really well, and you are doing great, and you've done so. And actually he understands that that's me, my little girl and me trying to make myself proud, and then feeling disappointed. And even like, off the back, sometimes when we have arguments, I'll be the same. Oh, I shouldn't have reacted that way. Why am I being like that? Actually just saying it's okay, like, you're trying your best. And that was one thing my dad always did teach me when I was younger, was when you go to bed at night, as long as when you put your head on the pillow, you tried your best. That's all you can do.
It's a great message. It's a great message, isn't it? Simple, but it's great.
I think what I found is that, not knowing is kind of bliss sometimes, isn't it? You don't know what you don't know, and you go through life a little bit blind. And as I started to go into personal development and learn more about myself, I started to put more pressure on myself. Go, I know this now. I should be reacting well to my emotions. I studied emotional intelligence, and at first I really wrestled with that. I really struggled because I'm not living up. My standards became higher because I learnt more and I became more aware. And I think that's a journey that everyone needs to be compassionate with themselves about. Like, you don't know what you don't know. So your past you didn't know what your current you knows. But also, as you know more, not to then increase the pressure that you should be perfect and have these ridiculously unrealistic standards of yourself.
Yes.
And that's something that I struggled with for a while. I was like expecting myself to be at this high level all the time.
Yeah.
And actually, you know, something I've said in the podcast a lot, I talk about psychology and personal development and emotions. I've not got it all figured out, and I'm not perfect, and I definitely don't get it right all the time, and I never will.
Yeah.
I think that's important. We take ourselves off any pedestal we ever put ourselves on, or how we sell ourselves to other people. Like, we're real people, we're human beings. And you mentioned social media earlier, about it really can come across quite false potentially, and it's subconsciously we start to think, oh, I should be like that, I should be like that person. They're flawed, they've got their own issues, they've got their problems with their relationships and their insecurities. They just might not talk about it, but they're human beings. And going back to your story, really early on, it looked all great from the outside, and it does to other people. We go, wow, their life looks great. But when you start to have these real life conversations with people, which you don't often do, but when we do, we're like, wow, they're carrying some same shit that I am. Wow. You know, they're normal, I'm normal. And it's when we feel different. Like, am I the only person thinking like this? Am I the only person wrestling with this? And it's not until you start to have discussions with people, or even go through therapy, where you're like, you know what, I'm okay.
And actually, I think it makes you less judgmental of others, I found, because I've realised that we're all got our own stuff. We've all got our own trauma, our own flaws, and like sometimes I think, oh, it's really annoying that this friend of mine does this. And I'm like, hang on a sec, you do this, which is just the same, and you're just, you know, you've got your flaws, and seeing the great parts of people, and actually even like that's helped my relationship with my parents, because I realised that they carry their trauma from their parents, and actually it was harder for them because this was never spoken about in their eras, and they probably didn't even have the opportunity to work on this sort of stuff, and actually almost forgiving them for their stuff and that they've put onto us, like our parents, because they just, you know, parents always do their best, but I think a lot of us be like, well, my parent was awful at this, and actually forgiving them for those things, that's really
I think that's a great point. Such a really important point. I think anyone who's experienced therapy and have gone quite deep, or even if you haven't, to be fair, it's easy to sort of put a lot of blame on others and naturally be a bit judgmental maybe of past experiences. But we think about your caregivers and your parents, they all did their best based upon what they knew. And when you start to have that kind of almost intergenerational compassion, which is what you're having there, and you think, God, our parents, well, you know, their parents were in the war, obviously, depending, obviously I'm a little bit older, so my grandparents, but, you know, then I go, wow, what was life like during the war? What's life look like in like post-war? People weren't sitting around talking about their emotions. So no wonder my parents had these struggles, and they were wrestling with these things. It kind of makes sense. I do think never defending stuff, but understanding stuff is very different. So you know, accepting what's happened in the past and understanding it is really important. But then having compassion and empathy for your parents or people in your past, to think, well, they were just doing the best with what they knew. And that is such a real kind of key place to get to. And I suppose with our conversation today, we're almost talking about the phases of personal development and therapy, because I think at first when the doors are opened, it's really painful. Because you look at it and go, whoa, I'd never really realised that my dad had given me that stuff. Cheers, Dad. Bloody hell, Dad. Giving me all this crap I've got to deal with. But actually, he was just doing his best with what he knew how. And it takes a bit of time to get there. And I just think that's a really important point that I just want to highlight there for people kind of listening. Because I think it's important to look at your previous relationships. Because you talked a lot about your romantic relationship now. Well, a lot of that, and that your attachment types and your securities are based upon what your attachments are like with your parents. And it's easy to go, oh, I'm struggling in my relationship because of you, Dad, or Mum, or whatever. And actually, you know what, that's just a blame, rather than going, I understand why I'm like that, and I can have compassion for that, and then take responsibility for how I move forward now, is a lot more empowering as well.
And also, like, we have both spoken about children and saying, like, it actually means that then there's every generation you can heal generational trauma. So, you know, the work that we do will impact our children and will probably traumatize them in a certain way. They'll carry things they can then heal. So actually, and I'm sure our parents did better than their parents. You know, we're always, well, hopefully, I think not everyone, maybe most people are trying though, at least, you know, to heal one better from the generation before. And like you say, I think it is important, because otherwise, if you blame your parents, it doesn't help anyone by blaming, or even, you know, just in general life, just saying, you know, you're like this, etc., but actually giving them compassion, understanding. And I think when you've been through, I think because I've gone through the anorexia and being in such a dark place, I've always actually been like, whenever I see, say, drug addicts or anything in the street, I always just have such compassion for them, because I know what it feels like to be in a place where you feel like you can't get out and you're so wrapped in an addiction and just feel like you're stuck. So I've always actually had like homeless people and anyone like that. And actually also maybe with my clients who are very overweight and struggle with emotional eating, I just have such compassion for them because I understand what it feels like to be so pulled in by that.
Yeah. Well, when you're kind of in this kind of stuck, sort of dark place, it can feel impossible to get out of. It can feel like it's never going to get better. I'm going to feel like this forever. There's no way out. If there's someone listening now who is in that kind of sort of dark place, what would you kind of say to them, Chloe?
I think obviously it's really hard to hear, but I think that if you can be consistent and patient with trying every little, like a small amount every day at your healing and working on yourself, that there can be a way out. But I think just like with, I see it in weight loss as well, I think it is that having to be consistent and patient, because if you say to yourself, well, I'm going to try and, I'm in this dark place, I'm going to try and come out of it, and then it doesn't happen in a week, and then you just give up and go, well, I'm always going to be, then you will just give up. So it's about, and like I spoke about earlier, that discipline. And actually, if you can be disciplined and really seek help, I mean, there's lots of free places you can seek help, like online, phone lines. And I know there's things like BetterHelp as well these days, like good, therapy services that are very, very, very cheap. And just really trying and being consistent and working on healing yourself, talking to people, finding resources, etc., and just keeping going. Because, well, from my experience, if you do just be consistent, you can come free of it. I do think it is that thing, and unfortunately it's got worse with technology, that people just want things quickly. Yeah. Just like with fat loss. And I think that's why, because people are like, I'll just go to the doctors and get antidepressants, that's easier. And I'm not saying antidepressants are bad, like they're fine to use whilst working on yourself, but I do think you have to try and put some effort in as well, your side. I think that's what people find hard, and not give up.
I think it's a really good message. I'm doing a course at the moment on motivational interviewing, and it put up a statement from a study that seems really obvious, but it was basically, the more you try something, the more you're likely to be successful. So even if you try and fail, because I think a lot of people get to a point, if I've tried it 2 or 3 times, obviously I'm not going to be able to do it. But actually the study was suggesting that that's not true. The more times you try something, the more likely eventually you will be successful at what you're trying to do. And I think that's a really cool message, because some people will literally go, I've tried it once or twice, hasn't worked, so I'm not able to do that. But actually that's not what this particular study suggested. And I think it's a really simple message, but I think it's a really important one. As well.
It's a fight, isn't it? It's a fight, and it's kind of, it's staying in the fight. And just that people kind of, I think sometimes in our modern world and society, people want the pain to go away instantly, and I can totally get that. When you're in it, it's not a nice place to be in when you're in a dark place. If you can see it as a fight, and it's going to be bloody painful, but if you can just keep moving forward, whatever you can do, it can be the smallest thing, and stay in the fight. Just stay in. You can take some heavy punches, you can feel like you don't want to get up for the next round, but just get up for that next round and just get through that next round, and just think one round at a time. If you hear great fighters or anyone who's been in a dark place, that's how they talk about it. It's the same philosophy throughout, and it really is just stay in there. I
think also that knowing that, like you're saying, you might have one step back but keep going. And I used to say to myself as well, if anyone is in a dark place, what's the alternative? Because you can either stay how you are, which is what I used to say to myself, well, I'll either stay like this forever, or I can just try. There's no harm in trying, because I'll either not get there or I'll just stay the same. But I thought I'll probably get a little bit better if I just keep doing what for example, like what my coach was saying. And at the time, a lot of things she would say to me didn't make sense, and I'd be like, I don't really know why I'm doing this, but I'll just keep going and keep trying, and then it like starts to make sense. You start to notice the changes. And I think with my partner as well, and I think it's really hard, I think with men it is slightly different. I think it's getting better, but a lot of men don't understand their emotions. And I remember when I met him, she asked him, how do you feel when Chloe does X in an argument? And he was like, I don't know what I feel. And he just didn't understand his emotions at all. And she's like, where do you feel it in your body? I don't know. And then over the practice, he can actually identify like guilt, resentment, anger, where he feels it and understands it. And I think that's really, really important for us to be aware of and understanding. And if you can just keep working, and he'll say to me sometimes, oh, I haven't come that far. I'm rubbish. Like, I'm not like all these, these, and like you were saying earlier, it's like, yeah, but I said to him the other day, I was like, but you know how to understand your emotions now. Like, you didn't know that 4 years ago. But and you've just got to keep going, because what's the point in stopping? I said, why would you want to give up? Like, look, you've come so far. But I think we can be quite hard on ourselves, and that's even why people give up. Oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not like this person on the internet, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah.
Comparison.
It's I think as a man, it is hard, the emotional piece, and I think something I've really struggled with over my many years is to try and get a little bit more emotionally aware and get in touch with my emotions. 'Cause I think when I was younger, I was a bit like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Why? I wouldn't even see the value of it. But I think as I've understood more about myself and relationships, and to be honest with you, just physical health.
Yeah.
And I can see the sort of, this sounds like a strong word, but the damage it causes physically, psychologically in your life when you constantly avoid and suppress your emotions. But of course, if that's what you've been taught in childhood and taught for your environments, all subconsciously, you're going to do that. And I think what we're saying today is it is incredibly valuable, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your health, whether it's your eating behaviours, whether it's your life, to learn more about your emotions and get more in touch with them. But I can also see why people don't think it's valuable.
Yes.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
And I think as I've become more open to them, and definitely still on that journey, I've seen so much value in myself and how I build relationships now, and connection. It's really helped.
And then you can just be, rather than telling people that that's the way to be, you can just be the example. And I think that's where, people have said to me, oh, how are you, so positive around this situation, which is a hard situation, for example. And then I just tell them that that's just from doing, the work and working on myself. And I think you can, if you emulate that in your life, people will ask you like, oh, how are you so happy? Or why are you like this? And how are you so healthy? And they'll want to try it too. So just being an example rather than you must be like
you're sort of preaching.
Preaching. Because I don't think preaching works.
No. It's sort of being the change you want to see.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you can sort of just say, you know what, I would love other people to ask me better questions or be more supportive. Well, are you asking them questions, James? Are you being supportive to them? Because otherwise I'm expecting the world to give me something that I'm not putting into the world.
Yes.
So being the change we want to see in the world. Which I've stolen that quote from someone, I'm sure, maybe Gandhi. But it's a really good philosophy, I think, to have. But I think when I was younger, I was very preachy. I remember learning my first lot about nutrition and coming home and telling my mum how to eat and my brother how to eat. Right, we're taking that out of the kitchen. Or my ex-girlfriend, or now ex-girlfriends, I was saying to her, right, we're going to cut all this out of the kitchen. She's like, James has gone absolutely crazy. And I was just preaching, and obviously a young, keen 20-something kind of thinking I've got the answers. And as we get older and wiser, we realise that we don't have as many answers as we think.
Yes.
I always think about an analogy with sleep as the same as happiness, and that you haven't got complete control over sleep, but you can give yourself the best opportunity to get the best night's sleep with certain sleep hygiene things, right? And I always think a bit like that with happiness or being fulfilled. You can't necessarily guarantee it, but what you can start to do is work on yourself and understand yourself, and at least give yourself the best opportunity for that to happen. I think a lot of people like a good night's sleep, just every now and then it happens, and they're like, well, that's a bit of a touch. I've had a good night's sleep. And it's a bit like that with happiness. They don't, I think, give it enough thought process and in terms of feeling fulfilled or understanding themselves. And I've had a couple of conversations with clients about that, and it seems to have, sometimes you just get an analogy that works with people. Because the amount of people that just go through life expecting things to be all right or hoping things will be all right, and that's incredibly disempowering, isn't it? Because just going through and hoping is not the same as being able to take like a level of control. And that's something that I can't remember where I got that from, because that wasn't me either. But it really, when something just clicks in your mind. I just wanted to go back to, you were talking about patience and society, because it always takes me back to a story. My partner, when she was younger, worked in a nice shoe shop. And when she first started working there in the mid-noughties, if they didn't have the shoes in stock that someone wanted, they would order them in. And it would take about 7 to 10 days to come in. And the customer would be incredibly grateful. Thank you for sorting that out. Thank you. Really appreciate that. By the end, before she moved on to her next role, like 10 years later, if they didn't have the shoes they wanted that day or couldn't go get them that day, the customer would quite often kick off. And you think in that 10-year period, just for an anecdotal evidence of our patience levels based on technology and how we expect things now, you see that across the board, don't you? Be it expecting your delivery now, or expecting results now, or being able to put in minimal effort and receive something. And I think it's quite an interesting analogy again for how our mindset has shifted in such a short period of time.
Yeah, that's right.
You see it loads of clients, don't you? The impatience now for anything.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier, I wrote it down because I think it's such an important thing, being able to just clients sort of their realistic expectations, especially when we get new clients, especially say weight loss people. Sometimes their ability to be patient, to understand themselves and the process that's going to help them lose the weight in the best way, people aren't patient enough for that now. They want it now, and if they don't get it now, they're going to move on to someone else who says they can give it to them now. And I think it's important that we don't try and get into that game.
And I always say to them, like, if they're a bit like that, I'll say, you know, you could go to another coach or do another fad diet. What will happen is you'll lose the weight really quickly and then probably put it back on, and then you'll be on a diet again and again. So actually the time frame for you to get to where you want to be and stay there will actually end up being 3 years with about 5 diets in that time. Or we could just do it really slowly and use a tiny bit of weight each week, but be consistent, and you'll actually get there quicker, because you'll enjoy your life, you'll be able to go out, you'll have fun, you won't feel restricted, but it just takes a bit longer. But you're right, like, people will sometimes ask me, like, I want to lose so how long is that going to take me? I'm like, and I actually will say, I don't know, it's actually down to you. Do you want to go out on the weekend? Do you want to drink a glass of wine a week? Do you want to have a pizza? Because I said you could go to the gym every single day for 2 hours if you want and do 20,000 steps and eat lettuce. You'll get there really quickly. Or you can live your life and eat how you probably will want to carry on when you leave the coaching and working with me, and enjoy food and have fun, and it would be a little bit slower, but you'll get there and you'll actually enjoy the process.
100%.
So you're giving people a sustainable way to do things. But it sounds to me another thing that you do, Chloe, is you're giving people tools and strategies, and you're educating people as well to give them more self-efficacy, so they can keep doing this stuff forever. You know, they've got these tools to be able to kind of, it's something me and Dan are really passionate about, is educating people, giving them tools so they can live a quality, happy, healthy life in a way that's aligned to them, and they can feel confident in their own abilities.
100%. I always say that I really would like, when someone works with me, for me them to see me as their lifestyle coach, not a diet, because then it just, again, it takes that pressure off as well. But also just, we're going to learn how to live your life in a healthy way that you can keep doing forever. It's not like I'm going to work with Chloe, then at the end of that I'll go back to how I was before. And that's why they say, do I need to cut out this out of my diet or this? And I say, no, like, you can eat, like, I want you to be able to eat your crisps and your bread or whatever if you like that. Or I say, do you want to eat crisps till the day you die? And they'll probably say yes. I say, okay, we're not going to cut it out then, because otherwise you'll binge on it, especially with women. It then creates that binge eating thing. I mean, I might say, like, I don't want you eating crisps all day long. We might cut back the amount, but we're not going to cut it out. So it's that, like you say, it's that sustainability. It's really important.
Another thing you mentioned earlier with the female clients is the body image side of things. How do you go on the journey to kind of build a better relationship with your body? Because that's something that, you know, again, I can relate to as a man. I remember getting into the fitness industry going, bloody hell, I look like absolute crap. I better sort myself out here. And having so much pressure on myself to look a certain way based upon my insecurities and my perception of how I should look. That was hard. So I definitely think it's something that men and women definitely both experience. But from a female perspective, how do you sort of begin to go on that journey to build a better kind of connection or better relationship with your own body?
I think the first thing is to really understand in the culture where you live, because it's different across the world, is understanding, you know, what the beauty standards are and the culture around that, because there is normally, you know, money behind that, and there's a reason that you're pushed a certain thing. I listened to a really good podcast with someone who used to work for Nivea, and she said that they created a cream, they just made it up. They're like, should we just make this thing that gets rid of something like pores on your nose? And so then you're immediately creating an insecurity of pores, like, oh, you've got to hide your pores, and then that becomes a thing that you want to get rid of. So be aware of the culture you live in, because Japan is going to have totally different pressures of women of how they should look to here, and being aware of the conditioning behind that, so you can almost actually come away. And it's really hard for you, really important for you to analyse whether you want to do that. And it's actually the same with all things in life, with social conditioning and this group mentality that humans have, is actually working out, like, do I want that though? Like, is that actually what I want? So the client might say like, or someone struggling with body image, yeah, I just really want to have a flat stomach. Like I really struggle with the fat like on my stomach. It doesn't look like how it should look. Okay, but is that really what you want, or is that what the culture is saying? And from a health perspective, of course, we want to reduce waist circumference for diabetes, things like that, that's fine. But if it's like body image specifically, really working out what you want, and that can be hard because we're so hardwired to believe that's the right way to look and be, because it's everywhere. And then really try and work that out. And once you've done that, is the kind of normal strategies I'd say to people is actually, first of all, that awareness we were talking about earlier, is becoming aware of your daily chatter around your body, like, don't like this, or I don't like that, walking past the mirror, oh, look at that wrinkle, and actually starting to become aware of that first, and then seeing if you can replace that with something. So you walk past the mirror and you go, oh, I don't like that wrinkle, oh, and I almost sometimes have a little conversation with myself, like, that's funny, you're doing that again. And then just saying something, because I don't like saying things like, I am beautiful, because I don't believe it. So I'll just say like, you know, let it go, or all is well, or I trust myself, or I am enough, just something like that. And just try and sometimes when it was really bad for me, I'd have to just literally go, I'm enough, I'm enough, I'm enough, just to break that story of, you've got a wrinkle, that's bad. And even investigate, like, so saying, I've got a wrinkle, that's bad. Why is it bad? Who said it's bad? You know, like, is that culture again? Is that conditioning? And working that, I think those are really important things to do. So awareness, seeing if you can change the thought pattern, and deciding whether it's a cultural thing or it's what you want yourself.
I think they're really great points. First of all, it's being aware of your environment and how it's influencing you, as all of our environments influence us and condition us and give us these beliefs and formulate how our minds work sometimes, and going, well, hang on, if I take a step out of this environment and I'm somewhere else, and we subconsciously or consciously compare ourselves, don't we, to our environment. If you go to a gym full of people in really good shape, you're going to feel different, as opposed to being in a gym where people, you know, subjectively look in not as good shape, maybe. So yeah, that awareness of your environment is such a great point you bring up. And then that self-talk, how because we all talk to ourselves, there's millions and millions of words go through our minds all the time, and catching our thoughts to go, oh, here we go, here's that story that I'm ugly again, I'm just a bald idiot again, here we go, it's come up again. Well, you are bald, James. But actually just sort of taking some of those thoughts a little bit less seriously, and if you can learn to sort of turn them into a kind of a light-hearted chatter, which is a process and a skill, I think that those are two really valuable places to sort of start. Where else on that journey would you sort of guide people and take people when it comes to body image? And I only bring it up and highlight this because I think it's something that a lot of people can relate to. I think lots of us have insecurities with our bodies, and especially in social media now, we're constantly being inundated with beautiful people and great looking bodies. So I think it's just something to sort of highlight today. Where else would you sort of encourage people to go on that path, Jenny?
What else to look at? Or I mean the other thing I was going to add is I definitely think that to remember not to value your worth off your appearance, and know that you really deep down people like you for you and who you are and your energy and your spirit, and actually doing more of the inner work can make you more of a beautiful person than your appearance. And I know again it's hard because we do live in a world where it's so valued, appearance is so valued, and we see it because the person stereotypically who looks great tends to immediately get a lot of followers, say on Instagram, and does well in that sense because of how they look. So then you think that is important, but actually really understanding that it's, you know, not, and you are so much more than that. And you know, when we hang around with our friends, we don't go, oh yeah, he's my friend because he's got a six-pack. Like, that's not the reason that they're your friend.
We sometimes validate the world based upon how we validate ourselves. And I remember when I was in the industry, probably about 18 months, and I was in a car accident. And after that car accident, I was in quite a bad way. And I couldn't do any exercise. I could barely move for a period of time. So all of my strength, my conditioning, my physique looked totally different. I lost all my muscle. And I had to sort of view myself a little bit differently and sort of to change my identity a little bit and go, James, you've given yourself a narrative around who you are and based upon my own insecurities and stuff like that. And when I stepped back in the gym, I felt really most insecure I've ever felt. You know, I literally looked like I'd never lifted a weight in my life. And I'm now this personal trainer with a client base. So I had to start to look a little bit, and it's the first time I had to look a little bit deeper at myself and go, are you just someone who is a fitness person, or are you more than that? Is there more to your personality and character than just lifting a few weights and being this fit person in the gym. And it took me many, many, many years to sort of unpeel some of those layers to realise I'm not just that person. But it's easy to kind of just validate yourself on looks or, like we said earlier, material items. And it's not until you start to either have those things taken away, like in a car accident, for a period of time those things were taken away, or you go through things in life where you lose a relationship or you lose a business or whatever, and you start to go, wow, actually I need to change how I view myself. And I'm not this business, I'm not this physique, I'm not that, I'm more than that. And I think it's a really valuable journey for us all to go on, but quite a difficult one.
Yes, yeah. And I think, like we're saying, and actually with like the pressures of society, and you said earlier about time as well, and that's where it can be quite difficult, and some people aren't ready to sort of do that, and they would just want, you know, the quick fix of, oh, I'll just lose the weight, that will make me feel better. And sometimes I think we do have to go through those things to realise that's not the right way to do it. So we might have the bad body image and say, I know if I drop all my dress sizes or get a six-pack, I know I'll feel more confident. Maybe we have to go through that to realise, oh, it didn't make me more confident, I still feel bad. Okay, maybe I need to actually look at, and you do hear it a lot with successful people, don't you? You hear that they live in a huge mansion with loads of cars and get the money, and then they realise they're not happy. You hear that a lot with like successful people, and they end up selling it all. And
do you think the word fix is an appropriate word? It's an interesting word that I've played about with sometimes. I'm like, is fixing the right way to think about it? I'm just, as I try and conceptualise it in my own mind, especially when we think about our body image and our insecurities, do we ever truly fix those things, or do we come to terms with these things and accept these things about ourselves? It's an interesting thing that I've started to sort of explore myself. What do you think?
I mean, I think that it isn't the right, I don't think it's the right thing to do, fix it, but I think that's what people think it will do. So they'll think that like,
if I do this, I'll fix it.
We'll fix that. But it's actually that, the self-acceptance is like so important. I mean, of course you can still have the six-pack and have the business, etc., but actually accepting yourself on that journey to it, not doing it from a place of self-hate, like, I'm going to get a six-pack, then I'll feel better.
Yes, it's very different, isn't it? So the outcomes and from the outside might look very different, but the drivers to that outcome could be either healthy or quite unhealthy.
Yeah, and actually, again, that will take the pressure off, because if you are trying to get the six-pack because you believe so heavily it will make you feel better, there's a lot of pressure there. Like, I've got to get to this place, or I've got to get the successful business, because then everything will be great. But actually, if you realise, oh, I can get the six-pack, but I'll work on being happy along the way anyway, there isn't this rush or pressure to get there.
I think the experience thing is because sometimes you do need to experience what you think you need in order to know that's not actually what was going to fix the issue or solve the problem or give you fulfillment. Because of course, for a lot of those successful people, in my experience, it wasn't, as we've spoken about a lot before, it wasn't the end destination anyway. It was the journey and the fulfillment they got from driving towards something. And then once they got there, they thought this would be this utopia thing that maybe it wasn't. But I think that's a really good way of going, is that actually maybe you need to go and have this experience to realise that's not it. You've still going to learn something along that journey about yourself. But now maybe we need to look at why you were looking at this way in the first place. Because as we always say, people learn through experience, don't they? You learn through experience. Like, that's why when your parents tell you something when you're younger, you still go and do it. Because they're trying to pass on their own experience of having done something that maybe wasn't the best thing to do. But until you've done that and experienced it for yourself, you only half believe people, don't you? And then once you've done it, you're like, that was it. I get it now. And it's experience is a powerful thing. Well, you guys talking about the breath work earlier, for instance. I haven't done it yet, but so I know once I experience it, I'll learn more from that than just you guys talking about it. But I think that's a really good point. It's not necessarily steer people away from something, because they're going to learn something. Either way, right? Even if it's learning, that's not what I wanted.
Exactly.
And that's fine. That's fine.
Experience and lessons are interesting, aren't they? What are some of the sort of lessons that you've gathered as a coach, Chloe, over these years of coaching about yourself or about women? What are some of the things that kind of stick in your mind as, wow, that's something that I've really learned and acknowledged and understood?
As a coach, I think that, every client is going to be completely different, and you are dealing with totally different personalities and backgrounds and like traumas, things like that. And I think the biggest thing is when we start, and you mentioned when you first got into nutrition, you were like, we've got to do this, that actually, like, we don't know it all, and also to be really flexible. I think with everyone is I've learned to be such an adaptable coach. Like, you know, if my client says they don't like this way, I'm way more like, okay, then we won't do it. Maybe we'll try, but I won't like force them. Whereas I used to be like, yeah, but you've got to do that because that is the only way. Like, if you want to lose weight, you have to eat this much protein in a day. Whereas now I'm just like, okay, like, you're really struggling, I understand. And maybe I think as you get older, you can, I don't know, maybe empathise more with people. And, you know, if she says to me, my client, I've got 2 kids, I'm on my own, I'm working, I'm really stressed, I just can't do X, then I'm way more likely now to be like, that's okay. Maybe have more compassion. When I was 22, whenever I started PTing, 23 or a bit older, but I would be more like, no, but you've got to do it. And so I'm much more flexible as a coach, and understanding people and adapting to them. I think that's really important as a coach, rather than just always saying earlier about preaching. Preaching doesn't work.
It's engaging in conversations, that working with the person.
Yes.
And not dictating to the person.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important.
I completely agree. There's one more thing I wrote down, which I'm going back a little bit now. You know, you were talking earlier about some things that your coach has said to you that at the time didn't make sense, but now resonate with you more with your more life experience. I found that with books. Like, sometimes I'll read a book. One of the books I really like is Obstacle is the Way. And there was things that were said in that book that I didn't really get. And then as I've gone on life and experienced more, and I've come back and I've reread it, all of a sudden it creates a crystal clear picture, because you've got the experience now to understand what they're trying to say. And I think working with coaches and messages resonating, or even going back and reading books that you've enjoyed previously and going back and reading them again, actually the book will always give you a different message because you're different from the last time you read that. And I think it just made me think about it earlier, was actually that I think that's a really interesting point.
I should quite let you get it right. Go on, mate, you can get it.
I think it's the first time I was going to swear, actually. This is a swearing podcast.
Go on,
I always fuck up the quote.
Just paraphrase it, mate. I know you've got it.
I'm going to give it a crack.
It's how I know Dan. I know what
it's
you're thinking.
It's not my quote.
I know what quote he's trying to find. Go on, mate.
You put me under pressure now.
I know.
So, I can't remember how it starts now. It's about, so I'm not going to do it, I'll do it a bit more as a story. So it's about a man standing in a river. So you can make me laugh. It's about a man standing in a river, and the quote goes, no man is ever the same man stood in the river, or no river is the same, and no person is the same, because when you step in that river, the water's going to be different, and each time that person steps in, they're going to be a different person. The idea being that even if you're stood in the same place, you're different and your environment will be different, because we're always learning and the environment is always changing.
So no man ever steps in the same river twice, because it's not the same man or isn't the same river.
That's what I said.
But it's a really good quote, isn't it? And I knew Dan was looking for that quote, and it's a really good one, because it's really talk about our own evolution, our own development. And I think, you know, when we've had past experience with other people and we think that was a negative experience, well, you've changed and they've probably changed. So what if you go back and try and repair that relationship or have that conversation differently? Because we can all look back at ourselves or others with judgment. And we mentioned this earlier a little bit, but I do think to realise that hopefully we're growing and developing. So when we do go back into that river, and you could just use it as an example of reading a book.
Yes.
Our whole lens is different, because our experiences are different, and hopefully we've grown and developed. And I love that quote. I think think it's brilliant, and I think it highlights our own evolution and the evolution of our environment. Things are always changing, and we've got to be able to adapt. And that's what you were talking about earlier as a coach there, Chloe, weren't you? About the ability to adapt according to who's in front of you, and your own philosophy will change and develop as your business grows and as you learn more, and you seem like someone who really wants to grow and develop it and learn as well.
And I think that connects with the preaching thing, because I never ever will say that I 100% believe something, and I won't preach it, because I know that I change, therefore my beliefs change. So I might one year think this is the best way that everyone should exercise, and then I change and my life changes, something happens to me, or whatever it is. 2 years later I'm like, oh no, actually it's this one. So I never want to be that coach that says, you have to eat this way, this is the best way, this is the best way to exercise, because I know that, we all change, we're all different, and I'm going to change, I know that, and my own training does change over the years as well. So with our beliefs, it's really important that we're adaptable and don't preach one thing, and also we're aware ourselves that we change as well. and be investigating of that, because sometimes I'm unsure of what I think of, like, say, current things going on in the world. I'm like, I don't really know what I think of this, and I have to, like, really think about, do I think that's good, and actually be aware that I might change my mind in a few months and I'm not actually sure what I think.
So
but that's okay, again, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's also understanding others, that from a coaching standpoint, but maybe just a life standpoint, that our values change, and that will dictate our priorities in life, won't it? You know, and what your values are now might be very different in 5 or 10 years. So not only will you change as a person, your lifestyle might be different because your values are slightly different. And sometimes I've been around people and they're acting exactly the same they did do 10 or 20 years ago, and I mean this in a total non-judgmental way, but I do wonder, are they either acting out of a line of their values, or have they just not changed and grown and developed? Someone met me now compared to me 20 years ago, I'm a very different person, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a positive thing. Chloe, is there anything today that I feel like we've had a fantastic conversation? I feel like I've covered so much. Is there anything you feel like we haven't covered, haven't spoken about, that you'd want to sort of bring up today that you think is a really important message for men and for women? But I do appreciate for you, your focus and your specialist area is females, because it's a great opportunity for me and Dan to have a female on the client, because female on the podcast, because it opens up our mind as well. I think for me, having a very kind of male dominated background, and then meeting Dan, I'm like, great, but I'm seeing it through a male lens. Seeing things from a female lens has definitely helped me in a lot of ways. But I'm curious and open if we might have missed something today as well.
God, you know, I think we've covered, like, everything I'd really, that I'd talk
well,
about.
It's gone quite, it's an hour, it's nearly 2 hours. It goes quick, doesn't it?
It does. That has gone really quickly. Yeah.
I've got one more question for you, though.
Okay.
So where I made that sound really serious, didn't I? I didn't mean it to sound that serious. I've got a question. Where do you see your future? So in terms of the next sort of 3 to 5 years, in terms of the way your career is going, and I know, again, the way I imagine you're open-minded to change if things change. I'd imagine that's pretty. But have you got a sort of a vision of where your business is going, or do you just go with the flow? Yeah,
I mean, it is literally like you're saying about changing, and actually I've had a lot of feelings recently of that. So I can normally tell, like, when I feel like something is in the process of changing. And my business at the moment is very heavily on nutrition and fitness, and with a little bit of the mindset. But I've started to notice more of my clients going more that mindset kind of therapy route, and I do see my future going more of a clients that work with me, we work on everything. So they don't just come to me for nutrition and fitness. It will be, we work on your mindset and your nutrition and your fitness. So I'm more of a holistic approach. And my coaching has grown quite a lot. So I've now employed a coaching assistant to help me, and I would like to employ like a couple of more coaching assistants. They can help me and grow that, but that so that I can specialize myself and do more sort of real one-to-one intense work with people, so that they can help, you know, my other girls that maybe don't need as much. And I would like to do more, you know, events in person, you know, retreats and things like that, and talking and just helping, and so that the messages, like some of the things we've spoken about today, can get further out there than just my clients. And I have, like I mentioned earlier, I've got a lovely lady helping me like with that sort of stuff. And, you know, we've even been talking about going back down some of my old modelling routes, and, you know, using that, you know, ways to get out there and talk to people, and, you know, me being comfortable on camera, which has come from the modelling, and using that to help more people. So I guess that's kind of where I see. So the name Chloe Inspires of my company came from someone saying years ago, like, your message is really inspiring, and then just Chloe Inspires was kind of born. So I guess I see Chloe Inspires just reaching more people if I can around the world, and actually just talking about a lot of the stuff that we talked about today.
That's amazing.
And with that, where can people find out more about you, Chloe?
ChloeInspires.com. And Chloe Inspires on social media, basically. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you for a really enjoyable conversation. Again, I always know I'm having a good conversation, because I always say
time flies.
Time flies. It really has gone by really quickly, and loads more questions I could ask you, so maybe we'll get you on again in the future. But thank you, I've very much enjoyed your
well, thank you for having me as well.
All right, thank you guys, and we'll catch you next week.